1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
Is she done?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Edwards. Today I'll be giving an informative speech on the United States Civil War. Okay? So first things first, I have a roster to hand out. I'd like you to just put your name, email, phone number so the instructor can contact you to verify you're in attendance. All right, so to begin, the Civil War was a tumultuous time in our nation's history from 1861 to 1865. According to Wikipedia, by one estimate, the war claimed the lives of an estimated 620,000 to 750,000 soldiers. About 10% of men military age in the North and 30% of military age men in the South. In my speech, I have determined 3 factors that led to the Great Conflict. 2 of them minor, 1 of them major. The first factor is cultural differences. Even to this day, there are many cultural differences between the North and the South. According to Jonathan Earl in the article, The Political Origins of the Civil War, he states, while few historians would disagree that the Civil War had important economic, social, and cultural causes, the fact remains that the southern states didn't secede because the North had built a vast industrial economy and wanted to expand it to the West, or because more people read Northern rather than Southern books and periodicals. Secession was a response to a new political reality, the collapse after many decades of Southern slaveholders' iron-fisted control of federal power. The voters of the United States selected a president and a party committed first in containing and finally ending slavery. People living in the North were interested in labor-sharing machinery, thus, in turn, advancing technology, in order to reduce manual labor and labor costs. In the North, the Puritan work ethic prevailed. Thus, people were working long hours and 6 days a week. The North was more devoted to education than the South. Illiteracy was much greater in southern states, even among the landed gentry. If the rich were educated, it was usually by private tutors. Only 10% of the nation's public high schools were in the South. In 1858, Senator William H. Seward of New York famously described what he called an irrepressible conflict between opposing and enduring forces that could only end once the United States became entirely a slaveholding nation or entirely a free labor nation. Ever since the beginning of our nation, the 13 colonies all had their own advantages and disadvantages. A pro in the South was the fertile soil and warm weather. In the North, the earth may have been good, but the harsh winters inhibited crop growth, especially in comparison to conditions in the South. The fact that South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union is no surprise considering that they were also the first in the War of Independence as well. Upon reading Declaration of Causes, which induced the secession of South Carolina, compiled by Norman P. Desmarais and William H. McGovern of Providence College, it becomes clear that the South was never satisfied with the conditions of the ending of the Revolutionary War. South Carolina was never on board with having the federal government call the shots. They wanted more freedom to have the state government make their own and govern laws of each territory. A second minor cause of the Civil War was political. The U.S. is a country with a strong central federalist government. The South wanted a more state-centered government in which the states could create and govern themselves. So the third and final factor that caused the Civil War, which was the major factor, was slavery. Slavery had been in existence in the world long before Christopher Columbus or Leif Erikson had discovered North America. The pyramids of Egypt were built by slaves, most of whom were the tribes of Israel. Those same tribes had been enslaved prior to the Egyptians by the Babylonians thousands of years ago. The word slave even derives from Slavic because the Slavic peoples were also made slaves after the time frame that the Jews were. The transatlantic slave trade initially started when warring African tribes would sell the losing tribe members to the Dutch traders, who would then take the slaves to plantations and colonies throughout the New World. In conclusion, the war started when the Confederates bombarded Union soldiers at Fort Sumter, South Carolina on April 12, 1861. The war ended when Robert E. Lee surrendered to the Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865. So I prepared a short conclusion statement to clarify my thoughts. To conclude this paper, the biggest thing we must learn from Civil War is the fact that slavery is immoral and unjust. One person must not take or impede on the rights of another, most especially someone who is an American citizen. We must recognize each other as one people, brothers and sisters who will not stand for injustice amongst one another. We must never allow greed of money or political disagreements cloud our judgment. Just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean that you hate them. That is the purpose of democracy and free speech. That's what makes our country the greatest country to ever exist on this earth. Today we are faced with nearly the same tumultuous and volatile environment. We have the Democrats and Republicans, the liberals and the conservatives, the constitutionalists and anti-fascists. We must be made whole the same way we were all whole on September 12, 2001, the day after 9/11. There were no divisions between us then. There were only American brothers and sisters. In this social climate and unrest, we must unite together or we shall have a civil war once again. We must realize this before it is too late. We must not forget the past, but always be learning from it. So thank you for coming. This concludes my speech.